Well, I wonder how many of you remember your first high school dance. I vividly remember mine. It was in October of 1963. My classmates and I were coming to get to know each other over the course of the previous 6 weeks, and it promised to be a delightful experience. And what I remember about that dance was not any one of the girls from my class that I danced with as a freshman, nor do I have any recollection of the music that was played. But I remember the dance vividly because it was the first and the last time in my life that I ever body slammed somebody. Yeah, you heard me right. It was the first and last time that I ever body slammed somebody. And let me give you the background. In the awkwardness of what it means to be a freshman as the music's playing, we're kind of like scoping out the scene that's there. And one of my classmates had been following me as I was kind of walking around the perimeter of the gym. And every so often he would take his finger and flick it behind my ear. Irritating as it was the first time, I ignored it, kept on walking, and so did he keep on following me. In a second act of bullying, he flicked my ear again, and I tried to the best of my ability to ignore it, and I kept on walking around the auditorium, no longer paying attention to the girls that were there or the music, but a little bit agitated by his actions. And finally, once again, he flicked my ear a third time, and I had it. And I turned around and I body slammed him. And he was a guy that was pretty substantial in terms of his weight, and he immediately fell to the ground. And of course, the crowd gathered around. And I have to say that my immediate reaction was embarrassment. I went against my own character. And I responded in a way that did not reflect what I knew to be the best principles in my own life. And I suspect that memory of that event over the course of all of these years has really caused me to take a good look at what my actions may in fact do. Now, I don't want to pretend like I haven't in the course of the years hurt other people by the words that I've said about them or to them, but I think it's experiences like that that call us to take a look at how we need to become more like Jesus. So when we hear Jesus say in today's gospel, you've heard the society say an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, offer no resistance to one who does evil. And what makes the power of Jesus' word have a punch is because we know that's the way he lived his life. For as oftentimes as you and I may feel badly because we're the objects of people's gossip, or maybe people's lies, or maybe people's violence, Jesus withstood all of that. This morning we heard Locke read that passage from the Old Testament, the story about Naboth's vineyard and how Ahab and his wife Jezebel were out to get that land. And we see that Jezebel took it to the extreme, had false charges brought against Naboth so that he was in fact stoned to death. And I think that's why it's so important for us when we take a look at a story like that, and we wonder in the midst of all of that, where was God in the midst of the violence that Ahab and Jezebel planned against Naboth? And the answer is God was right there in the midst of it all. He was there in the midst of it all, not trying to take away the freedom that Jezebel and Ahab had, but his presence there and the inclusion of that story in the scriptures becomes an example to us of how in the midst of violence, God is there to bring forth peace. God is there to help us to be shocked by my body slamming somebody back in October of 1963 because I was flicked behind the ear a couple of times, or God is there trying to teach us a lesson from Ahab and Jezebel by their violence, or in the midst of all that we're seeing today. God is in the midst of it all, calling us to work for peace, to work for respect, to make sure that we begin to look more and more at each other, not through our own eyes, but through the eyes of our dear God himself. And so let's pray about that today. Let's pray about that today, especially as our culture, our world is so enveloped with violence. Let's pray that we may not seek to espouse the worldly saying, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but rather let's pray that we may truly embrace in our lives what Jesus tells us: offer no resistance to one who is evil. In hope